What up, everyone? DJ Anubis here with you on the Metal Time Radio podcast with my good friend and the leader of the entertainment headquarters, Lambert, as he destroys his mic and everything else around him. He hasn't been drinking, I promise.
No. So
But
where's
we
the
are
judge
here.
today?
Yeah, we are here to do another Kaiju spotlight. And this time I chose to do Kumonga with him because he's obviously very interested in my tarantula collection.
Yeah.
But also just I wanted to see his thoughts on a not really talked about much kaiju that is within the monsterverse and stuff, but we don't see it in Legendary right now. But for those that don't know, Kumonga, of course, was initially, according to the U.S., we had named it Spiga or Spega. But that name didn't stick, thank God. Like Kumonga is a much better name for the spider.
Yeah.
So for you, like, what were your first impressions when you first saw Kumonga for the first time?
I always remember watching Son of Godzilla, where when what I seen was the American dub. So the first time I seen Kumonga, I only ever known that kaiju as Spider, as it said, and to be honest, I really thought Son of Godzilla was just like a comedy. There was some bits that were frightening with the Kamakaris, the giant mantis. I didn't really take that film serious till you first seen Kumonga emerge from under the ground. The legs coming out and seeing the sheer size and obviously the sheer, terrifying. That's the only way I can describe Kumonga, especially if you've got a fear of spiders. And Kumonga definitely delivers in terms of size and look. And, there's many famous spiders out there in film. We've got the ones from Harry Potter. We've got, of course, you've got Shelob from,
Yep.
from Lord of the Rings. And, of
Mhm.
course, now we have Kumonga.
Yeah, I think like you, I mean, I saw it. This is one of the movies I saw as a young kid, under 10, somewhere in there. And certainly seeing a giant spider. And then also, like, it's kind of like what you said, like the movie itself. And I think I saw this around the same time All Monsters Attack or something, where the one where the bullying kid and stuff. So I thought it was a kind of like a comedy too, but I'm looking back on it and watching some of the scenes with this Son of Godzilla. It's like Kumonga is terrifying. Like in some of the things, the instant kill on Kamakaris, and
Yeah.
the attempted kill on Manila. Like it's like, wow,
Yeah.
man, like, this is spooky shit.
Yeah. Especially like you just said, like the death of the Kamakaris, and then obviously that one scene where the little, the stingers coming out the mouth, and it's getting closer and closer to Manila and of Minya, sorry, and then obviously luckily Minya doesn't get killed, but that would have been terrifying. If imagine that they introduced Son of Godzilla only to be killed.
Right. Yeah, I'd seen some people saying that movie probably should have been renamed to Godzilla versus Kumonga because that's kind of like your final battle there between Kumonga being like the main villain there.
Yeah, I would have either see. I'm not a fan of the title of Son of Godzilla. I think they should have maybe have called it just Monster Island, Godzilla and Monster Island, because obviously it's not just focused on Minya. It's focused on scientific experiments and like how these animals are growing on the island. It would have been nice if they introduced other animals that had grown, like obviously we'll get Kamakura. Spiga, though, I believe has always been there. That's the only thing I would say, because there's this rumor and this talk of this giant spider which you hear about throughout the plot of the movie. So for me, Kumonga's always been of that size. So Kumonga really is always been there. So even calling it Godzilla and the Island of Kumonga would have been an interesting title.
Yeah, definitely. And that's an interesting point because I know that I read that So when they did like, I think you actually have it. It's called The Art of Godzilla, King of the Monsters. Do you have that art book?
Yes.
Yeah. So they have a picture of what looks supposed to be like Kumonga, but it's actually more of like a image of Shalab from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
But Doherty was saying that, like, you know, he thought about bringing some of these other cameos in during that film, but that he felt that one, it was costly, but two, he thought it was more of a challenge to kind of create their own creatures. But I kind of thought it was, I mean, it's fine to do that, but at the same time, I think even when we think back to Empire, when at the beginning Godzilla's fighting Skilla, that would have been cool to see Kumonga fighting Godzilla there. Like that would
Yeah.
have been cool.
Yeah.
So I'm a little disappointed that Doherty kind of felt like that it was
Yeah.
better to go with the no names because you really have to kind of build up the kaiju lore, and maybe eventually
Yeah.
they will. But right
Yeah.
now, I
I
thought
think.
that during that time it would have been better just to go with the name
Yeah.
brands.
Yeah. I think. As you know, the final scene in King of the Monsters is that of him basically regaining, I guess, his place as the Alpha Titan, and you have all of the Titans that you heard of throughout the plot kind of turning up at the end to acknowledge him. So obviously they had their own Titans, which in a way I understand why they did that, because obviously, like you mentioned, cost. It would say, for example, Toho wants $1 million for each Titan, you know,
Yeah,
and you had 8 on top of the additional 4. That's, you know, that's astronomical to have them Titans.
yeah,
But I do kind of also like what they've done with the Legendary Monsterverse in terms of they've used kind of Greek mythology and used Greek gods and naming the Titans after them, and it kind of sinks it into real world history. But you never know. I've always said if they were to ever expand and bring in Kumonga or any of the original Titans or Kaiju, the perfect for Kumonga for me has always been Kong over Godzilla, because I think there's been also that kind of that saying that they think Godzilla's too powerful in this, but then I look at things where he gets his arse kicked quite a lot, like, you know, but then he always bounces back, but it's always through help from others. Where, so in a way, I've always had like this dual kind of feeling on Godzilla. Is he too powerful, or for him to become powerful, he always needs a hand to get there? Where Kong is more or less a hand combat, no, you know, hand combat villain. Sorry, you know, kaiju, where he has no special abilities. He also gets helped by humanity with his, you know, with tech and all that stuff. So if they were ever to do, say, a prequel movie or another movie based like on Hollow Earth or back on Skull Island, I think the perfect four would be Kumonga, because Kumonga could be seen as like a new invading alpha titan on that island. And because he just has the Spinter and, you know, the Stinger, and could have an army of mini, you know, Kumongas running around under his control, I think it would be an interesting way to go.
yeah, yeah. It is interesting because even in Son of Godzilla, you know, there's a moment where where Kumonga's playing dead, and Godzilla thinks, "Oh yeah, what's going on there?" Like I don't know why he would snoop in that low, but you know, Kumonga hits him with the stinger in the eye, and it phases Godzilla a little bit to the point of blurriness, but it doesn't kill him or paralyze him.
Yeah.
So again, it kind of shows how much stronger Godzilla is at that point, anyway. But then you have Kumonga, who sort of has like this hard shell, despite being a spider, but he's vulnerable to heat. But for a while, he can take the atomic breath a little bit from
Yeah.
Godzilla. So that's kind of a cool aspect to his armor and everything. Um, the interesting thing also is about the original look is it's all puppetry and
Yeah.
but no suitmation. So this was another cool thing about it compared to the other monsters was it was all puppetry done. It wasn't like, you know, a guy jumping around in a suit or anything like that.
Yeah, and if you look at the intro that you did there before, where you had that scene where you had the suitmation of an actor in the Godzilla outfit, and then you had the actual Kumonga puppet on top of that suit. That's one hell of a size puppet.
Yeah.
That's quite a large feat for a puppet of that size, especially the mechanics of how it worked. So it's like you've got to respect the art form of the puppeteering of that went into to make Kumonga not only look fearsome but made our work and made the how shit operated on the island and stuff.
Yeah, especially back then, because like you got to account for the different leg movements and all this other stuff that's going on, and yeah, I think they did at the time. I don't know, it wasn't like awards or anything, but they did have a lot of praise about the puppeteering work for Kumonga in that film.
Mm-hmm.
So kudos to them for how they
Yeah,
pulled that off.
yeah, and we did like if you look back in the day as well, how they tried to do like things with the with like spiders. Like back in the day in 1955, you had the film Tarantula, which we did a review on the Entertainment Headquarters about. They used just photo, trickery with a tarantula,
Projection, yeah.
projection, and then there's is it the world that's attacked by a spider, and they actually used a car and dressed it up as a spider
Yeah,
and walked around.
yeah,
Yeah,
what was that
yeah,
shit? The Great Spider Invasion, that's what it
yeah.
was.
So that they did that, but for Toho to take it to the next level and to actually do a giant puppeteering spider just shows you how far it had came back then.
Yep, definitely. So yeah, we talked about his first appearance, which they do believe that the first Kumonga was a male. Now they believe that other generations of Kumonga were female,
Yeah.
but first appeared in Son of Godzilla, and then the last live version that we saw was, of course, Final Wars, where this is this one here, which looked wonderful in terms of coloration and look. But from what I understand of the history of Kumonga, he kind of started out as like this predator who would attack and eat anything. It didn't care what it was. But later on, as different story and lore goes, and even in Destroy All Monsters, he became like an ally to Godzilla and the other monsters when trying to fight King Ghidorah. And I think he's even considered somewhat of an Earth defender, which would be what Kong and Godzilla are. In your mind, do you like that angle for Kumonga, or would you like just to see him more of just his own thing?
Well, it's like in most cases when it does come to like the Godzilla law, anyone that was an enemy that survives ends up kind of becoming an ally. So it happened, like Mothra, they had Godzilla versus Mothra. Mothra became an ally, even though there was not like a solo Godzilla versus Rodan film. They were adversaries, then became allies, of course, Anguirus. I've always liked the fact that Kumonga was just this giant, ferocious predator. And I think I would rather have allowed her to be our own, or him to be their own thing. And that would have made Kumonga stand out, because a lot of people are like, well, what's that terrifying about a giant spider? Like, especially in like Kumonga, especially in the world of Godzilla, when you've got so many more dangerous, adversaries out there. But I've always had kind of this soft spot for Kumonga and a respect, because obviously, like you said, I've got like an interest in spiders. I don't have any like tarantulas or anything, but I do find them fascinating. And I've always actually found it more creepy to have a little spider than a giant tarantula. Like if you had like thousands of little spiders crawling around my room or on my face, I would be absolutely bricking my pants. But
Infested.
infested, but that have like a giant ferocious spider is also terrifying. The fact to have this idea of one not only being large, like a large alpha predator, but also is quite intelligent with hunting and seeking prey, which is another element I loved about Son of Godzilla, is the fact you're seeing Kumonga burst out of the ground and go after the humans that it had to obviously trigger it. Then when it did find Next thing you know, it climbs out of like the ravine or wherever it's living and goes into the main jungle, and then it kind of sets up a trap, and it's able to trap Son of Godzilla, Minya, and it gets the Kamakuris, and it like hunts them down and webs them, and it shows that Kumonga has intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I liked about it. That she was he or she was a fierce, natural, aggressive predator, like what a real spider is. And that's
exactly, and that's how I look at it too. Because you make a great point. So when we think about Shalab with Lord of the Rings, I would like to see, because you also made a great point about Kumonga maybe being a better villain against Kong on and maybe some inside Hollow Earth, where she is basically just her own predator. And so like she has her own domain, but like Shalab, there's like this fear, like even some of the other creatures within Hollow Earth won't even venture into that lair because they know that she's like formidable opponent. Shalab, like if you remember, the orcs want no part of her. Like they fear, like they had numbers, but they wanted no part of her at all. So when you have that kind of reputation, and I believe Shalab actually kind of comes from like the gods of ancient inner earth. So Kumonga would be perfect for that kind of type of aura around her.
Like,
you know what I mean?
and like if you look at Shelob as well, I think back if you read some of the older books, there was an even bigger and more ancient spider, which was her father. So if you can imagine how big he must have been, and he birthed all the tiny spiders. So I would love to see in the Monsterverse, like they've already hinted that there's like layers within the Hollow Earth, like obviously when you're seeing Kong at the end of Godzilla versus Kong, when he's in the Hollow Earth, he seems at peace, but then he's still lonely, and then he found that the key, that Hollow Earth even sunk even further into like a lower layer, and then you've got that in between world, which is the Axis Mundi, which is discovered in what you call it, the Legacy of Monsters, which seems the time there seems to cease, or seems to be at a lower level. So it would have been interesting to see, say, if Kumonga was living in the Axis Mundi, the fact that she started there is maybe a medium-sized, smaller Titan, but because time has passed over so much, period, she's just grew to an enormous size, and she could actually claim that to be her domain, and there could be thousands of mini ones, like in Harry Potter, where you have the main giant spider, and he basically controls like this army of little ones. I think if you had a Kong film with the spider that's potentially larger than him, or even larger than Godzilla, but with hundreds of smaller drone spiders, maybe the size of the Kumonga that we've seen, I think it would be sheer terrifying, especially with today's CGI and technology. And, we've already kind of had hints of what they can do with spiders, like you've mentioned. We did a creature feature not long ago on my channel on the Into the Darkness segment, where we showcased and talk about four spider movies. Infestive for me was a very interesting movie, but that gave me fear again of spiders, because like I say, you had large ones, you had the smaller ones, and it's like a combination of both that frightened me in that movie. And then you had Sting, which was all about one big ass spider, which wasn't really terrifying, the movie, but I liked the idea of it.
I thought it was really good because of the whole, it was able to mimic sound. Of course, it was like an alien species of sorts, but very cool concept. And, the fact that it was very intelligent, but because of its hunger, it outgrew its, its ability to stay loyal.
Well, I personally would like a Kumonga in this that's a mixture of both being intelligent and the aggressive predator, who maybe has the ability to outthink the likes of Godzilla. So, for example, I could see a scene where Godzilla's chased Kumonga into like a cavern, and he hears noises at the side of him, And when he goes to look, Kumonga's actually at the other side because she's managed, like you see, to trick him via sound and ambush him, which would give you that more feel and taste that Kumonga is a much more dangerous threat that we've seen.
Yeah, and going back to your Kong, idea that if they did that, you could almost mimic 2014 because if you remember the Mutos, the whole idea between the female and male was that if they bred, it would be like almost like parasites if they had eggs, because that's obviously the idea was to stop that. And that's why Godzilla was out there trying to control that. Well, you could play around with the same idea, have like a male spider that's trying to mate with Kumonga, and that if she should lay an egg sac, that would create a lot of havoc among Hollow Earth. So Kong has to find a way to prevent that, or even Godzilla and Kong again. But the ideas are limitless of what you can do. And even if they decide just to stick with Kong going forward, and we know that Monarch's been playing around with that idea.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. I'm going to get to a photo there in a minute, but if they go with that idea, that's a great concept. I mean, yeah, it mimics 2014 a little bit, but it still plays into the same thing with a different monster. And if you're paying $1 million just for Kumonga, then it's not as much because you don't have to have all these other cameos involved.
And it's like you see as well, people are frightened of spiders. So what better way to give Monarch Season 2 a bit of a bang than introducing Kumonga as the main threat? Because another idea I had is if they did like a direct sequel to Kong Skull Island or Godzilla vs. Kong, where Kong is left the island of Skull Island. While he's been away, he was the main alpha, keeping everyone protected. And then you had like these kind of parasites, which were the skull crawlers. But who's to say you had one of them with a long legs that went somewhere and found a way to evolve into the size of Kumonga, and she's in control of like a much more aggressive mother long legs, which was what we saw in the beginning in the first episode of season 1 of Legacy of Monsters, where you had the crab monster and you had a mother long legs battle it out on the edge of a cliffside. Who's to say that couldn't have been the beginning? Now that Kong's no longer there, somebody else has to take his place, and everyone would just suspect that it's going to be the skull crawlers, but in actual fact it's this aggressive species wonderful. Of spider.
Yeah, you'd actually come across like a graveyard, even though they did have a graveyard of skull crawlers, or that was actually Kong's, but you come across like a graveyard of skull crawlers and it's all webbed up and you're like, wow, what's going on here, and you end up running into Kumonga, which would be pretty amazing. So we know that generally Kumonga has like a weaponry of like the stinger. Her webbing comes out of her mouth, not out of the spinnerets, which is usually with the spider. As far as like Kumonga in the future, if we ever see her again, what would you like to see either added or adapted to her arsenal of weaponry?
Well, I think first thing I would do is make her bigger. Like, I think everyone just assumed when you seen the legs come out of the ground in the King of the Monster trailers, everyone was buzzing it up, but they brought in Kumonga, which is the first thing I thought. So I would definitely make her bigger. I would make her like a smart thinking predator. And as terms for her arsenal, obviously she has a stinger at the front. I would like to see her have a stinger at the back. And I would like to have like maybe spikes on her like smaller spikes on her legs, so like that'll give her the ability to climb or to even cut through, especially like if she like pinches herself into like the chest of Kong or Godzilla. They would
like added armor too, because they can't just grab her without being hurt.
And also I would like her to have different types of web attacks. So basically she can fire one that turns into a net. She can fire one that basically, like what we're seeing with Mothra, sticks people to walls or buildings. And I would like her to do one where if she's hanging upside down on a web, she gets a web and she can turn it into like a ball and then spit it out, and it's like a big ball that if anything it rolls and hits, it sticks to, and then finally explodes and makes them like stick to the ground, which would make it easier for people to then or her army of mini spiders to get a hold of.
Yeah, and that'd be kind of cool about the mini spiders because like she can kind of be like what a scorpion would do and carry some on her back, and then they can just slip out from her armor and start running around doing their business.
Yeah, and it's like also maybe have like, you know, we've seen like how other monsters integrate other species into them. Like, of course, Mothra in the Monsterverse is very much a mixture of a moth and a praying mantis. So where she has the ability to spit webs and have all these different, you know, light beam attacks, we could see Kumonga have some sort of like stinger attack where she can actually fire the barbs from the back end from us and actually in, you know, like a bee or something, like a hornet, and be able to like fire spikes out of her tail or even out of the ends of her legs. Just as
I'd like to see that more than the mouth part. The mouth part, they just need to rework the fangs, but then have that stinger like Mothra had in the back end. That'd be good.
Yeah, and it will be a great comparison to see her maybe take on Mothra as well. Where Mothra has lots of light attacks, which how I would work it with Kumonga is Mothra is a very light spiritual animal, creature, goddess, or however you'd like to describe her. I would like to see Kumonga be the opposite, like how Batross be the dark element. So lives in the dark, lives in damp areas. Instead of having light rays, she maybe a back end could like grow like a dark, like, you know, ruby red, something like that.
Yeah.
And, you know, but she only reveals that to her prey when she's about to hunt them or kill them. There's no elements of that nature. So it'll be hard.
Yeah, they mentioned that too, like in the first film with Son of Godzilla, that her eyes would normally be like a reddish pink when she was just kind of chill, but when she was excited, she would turn like a purple or bluish color. So that would be kind of cool. Like as you said, if they were to, she's kind of hunting around in her cavern, like if there's prey there, that her eyes like start turning red, and you know, of course, you would go with like the 8 different eyes, which would be kind of cool.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
So speaking of Monarch, because you know that's obviously going to be a show that we're going to get a second season of, and may or may not go beyond that. We don't know yet. But if Kumonga were to make it there, there is some concept art that they showed here of what she might look like in this. What do you feel about that, or would you rather more of a traditional spider look?
For me, that doesn't look like Kumonga, but I do think it's an interesting design. I think I sent you some images of Kumonga. There was a one where it was like where she was black and purple. I quite like the look of that design of Kumonga, which kept a mixture of new features with the classic features. Because the one thing I've noticed, especially when it comes to like when it came to like King of the Monsters, Michael Dougherty was able to create these kaiju, bring them into modern times for a modern audience, but keep them fairly classic in terms of look. But the best thing is he made them act like real animals. I had real animalistic characterizations to them. Yeah. So like imagine if you had like the Kumonga from Godzilla versus Godzilla's Son of Godzilla, but acted like a real world spider. I think it would be pure terrifying. The speed, how she's able to crawl up and down rock faces, or climb, or even go up a rock face, and suddenly she's underneath at the top, and she just pounces on Godzilla from above. Things of that nature, because obviously spiders are extremely fast as well.
Yeah.
So I think showing something like that with the speed of a normal spider would be quite terrifying.
Definitely. And like we said, you know, with CGI now, you can actually bring them to life a little more. We saw that with Ghidorah, Mothra, and Rodan, how it's a little more fluid, and then you just the mannerisms, like each one had their own characteristics their own sounds, their own roars.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever hers would be, it'd be sort of like in that insect type of speak, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Now I didn't know this until today, but there was a new spider discovered in Iran that's native to their area, and they named it after Kumonga. So it's like Scytoides Kumonga, and this is what the spider looks like. So it's kind of cool. It's got the same little yellow and black look, a little bit bigger in the carapace there, but a very cool looking spider.
It's got a bigger body than the back end, which is interesting.
Yeah, and this could be a male. We don't even know what like sex this one is, but the other thing that was interesting because we do have a spider-like creature in the monsterverse called Scylla, and so this creature, this spider, is called Scytoides Kumonga. So I don't know if they named Scylla kind of after that in some way. I don't know. I don't know the history there with that.
The thing with it, I've said this from day one. All of the MonsterVerse Titans, like original Titan, they are basically counterparts to the Toho monster, because it's their way of basically saying, yes, this is, say for example, when you look at Tiamat, this is Manda, but it's not Manda, if that makes sense. It's their way of getting around having the license, but it's clear as day what they've attempted to do.
We know what they're trying to do.
Yeah, so for me, when you look at Scylla, she is a mixture of a crustacean and an arachnid. So for me, she's a combination of, say, Ebera and Kumonga, and it was their way of mixing two Titans into one and creating something new and different.
Yeah, and she's almost got like that Chichula, like the almost tentacle thing going on there.
Yeah, and if you look at her in King of the Monsters, she was like a yellowy color, yellowy pale color. Then they give her more like the coral color in
Empire,
like the reddish color. So that was interesting. And in a way, you mentioned earlier that you wish that they had Kumonga there. I'm glad they didn't have Kumonga there, because if you've seen what happened to Zilla, that would have been quite. I would have probably liked that if when the explosion happened, just tons of webbing came out, and then you had a
bunch of spider babies.
Yeah, and then the next thing you know, you've got a news article of them doing like a cleanup, and you just seen people stuck in the webbing on sides of buildings with the fire and the army people trying to get them down from the buildings in the background. That would have been cool.
Yeah, and of course Godzilla be like, "Fuck, what did I do?" It's a bunch of little ones.
Yes.
So I know that you collect figurines like I do, and I tried looking online just to kind of gauge like what they had availability with Kumonga, and there's only one that I really liked, and it's the X Plus.
Yes.
And then this is the side view, which I thought was really great.
Like if you put that image back on screen, if you look at that, like the image for me of that alone looks terrifying now.
Oh yeah.
Imagine if that was CGI and worked and operated like an everyday spider. Maybe make the back slightly bigger. Maybe change the color a little bit darker. I think that would work in the MonsterVerse, me personally.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, the thing is, like, it's hard to even find that now, like, unless you're paying, close to $1,000 for it. But they don't make a lot of them at all. The ones that I've seen that are available are like cheesy looking ones. I'm like, I don't want that one. I think I actually saw one that resembles the one from Son of Godzilla, and that little boy is playing with all the monsters in front of the TV.
Well, let's hope with the way things are going with higher toys, they'll eventually release a Kumonga figure, because there's lots of, like, I guess what people would call medium grade Titans. I guess you've got the top favorites. They get merchandise produced in them all the time. Kumonga and Kamakaris, I guess, are not up there on the list, but I think even though they're not, whenever they do some sort of merchandise with them, it always sells out because it's so rare to get something with those on. So that's probably why the X Plus sold out very fast.
Yeah, because they're always limited, and of course, like I said, that one looks really, really good. Details nice on it. I don't remember how much it was initially. I don't never saw the actual price, but
well, if it's X Plus, it'll have been between 150 to 300 easily. Especially that comes with the companion piece, which is like the layer.
Kamikaze, yeah. So if they brought, I know we talked about it a little bit with the Kong and stuff. If they brought Kumonga back, what would you like in terms of a reboot? Like, how would you want to go about that? Would you want to see Kumonga more with Godzilla or more with Kong going forward?
Well, you've got to look at it in two ways now, because last year we had no Godzilla's -1, which is basically put Toho back on the map in terms of, there's all eyes looking at that. I think, what that film's been able to achieve. I think people are like, oh, another Japanese Godzilla movie. Oh, wow. That was like the main conscious of like non-fans. But because that film has done so well and has gotten a lot of, I guess, mainstream attention, when people hear, oh, now there's another Godzilla film, they're like, oh, I wonder if this one will be as good as -1. That's the conscious now. And I think Toho have a lot of pressure on them. So you've got to look at this two ways. If it comes to the Monsterverse, I've basically already explained what I would like to happen. But the fact that Monarch Legacy, a Monsters 2 is focusing more on Kong, which is definitely how things are looking, which I think's deliberate. I think in a way a bit like Hollywood, they had like a thinker's room where they had different writers, different creators come up with different ideas. So I think they already knew ahead of time before King of Monsters come out and not King of the Monsters, before New Empire come out, the direction they were going to take this. They knew that basically when it came to the films that basically what was going to happen at the end of New Empire is that Kong would find his people. Even though it's not said out loud, he definitely becomes the king by the end. He's the alpha of the apes. And now that has happened, and now that his, story arc from Skull Island to that has happened, you now have to focus on Godzilla. Because he's just known as this giant creature, alpha protector of the surface world. But it hasn't really went any deeper with his story other than that. So I'm assuming when it comes to the Monsterverse, the next film will be all about him. Yes, Kong will be in it, but I think he'll take a side step to Godzilla, and I'm hoping it's going to be more on the tone level of 2014, yes. Yeah. So if that's the case, like I mentioned, when it comes to the Monsterverse, and we're going to head to Skull Island, and I believe Skull Island and Monarch Legacy Monsters Season 2 is between 2017 and 2019. So basically, it's like, long after. And it's basically, I think one plot point of that is going to show how Monarch gets the outpost from Apex Cybernetics, because as you know, spoilers if no one's seen it, but it has been out for a while. At the end of Monarch Legacy Season 1, it's revealed that the people who was trapped in the Exodus Monday are now on Skull Island. They're in 2017, and the outpost, which is like that massive thunderstorm and all of that, is of course operated by Apex Cybernetics. But then if you skip to the beginning of Godzilla versus Kong, that outpost is now operated by Monarch.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see how that's happened. But when it comes to Kumonga and how you can get her in the mix, is, as we know, there's a battle that happens off screen between Kamazots and Kong, and it kind of disrupts the flow of the island. Because it's disrupted the flow of the island, not everything works the way it did. Who's to say that the skull crawlers enjoy being out on the surface because it's too cold, too wet, too rainy? Well, as you know, spiders evolve and love to live in wet, damp areas and dark, gloomy places. And it's exactly like I said, who's to say while the skull crawlers are frightened to return to the surface of Skull Island, who's to say there's another alpha predator that's took its place, which could be Kumonga in the miniature, Mother Longlegs, or who's to say because of the changes that's happened in the environment because of this off-screen battle that the Mother Longlegs haven't evolved as well.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, like, we didn't really touch on -1 that much in the storyline there because we know we've been talking about the sequel, which may involve either Anguirus, Biollante, or some other, like Hedorah or whatever.
Yeah, a lot of people are wanting Hedorah. I know that. And I think the only reason they want Hedorah is because the director of -1 mentioned if he could bring in another monster to face Godzilla in his world he's created, it would be Hedorah.
But going off of the seriousness of the first one, like, Kumonga is not a bad idea either. You could always say, hey, this smaller spider that was on Odo Island caught some of the radiated fish that were washing up on the shore and ate it, and that's how it became its own thing. That's a nice possibility.
Yeah, well, I was thinking because, like I said, there's two ways to go. That was my idea for Monarch in the Monsterverse. As for -1, I think long prior to the Oscar win, I think because of the hype and the popularity of -1, I think he signed on the dotted line to do a sequel long before we knew. And I think, if anything, if the timeline in my mind works, by the end of next year, we're getting Monarch Legacy and Monsters 2. That's 2025. 2026, because don't forget, due to the contract that has happened with Toho and Legendary, no production can work around the same time. It has to be before or after. So either pre-production will start next year on the next Toho film. That'll be released in 2026. And then in 2027, we're getting the next Monsterverse movie. And I think, me personally, I think whatever plans they've made has happened. It'll be Hedorah and Anguirus Biollante. But then once you've had another serious monster movie, I think we need to just have a fun traditional Godzilla movie, and that will be the perfect time to introduce Kumonga. So the aftermath of mass pollution, say it is Hedorah, for example, pollution this mutated water supply goes into like some sort of jungle-like area on a mysterious island that's not been discovered. Godzilla, after he's beaten Hedorah, for example, he's weak. He can regenerate, but because he's had this mass battle with Hedorah, he can't regenerate as fast as he used to. So a bit like what happened with Ebirah, the Ebirah movie. Godzilla goes into hiding into the cave on an island and decides to live there to regenerate slowly, unknown to him because of his presence in this mixture of events because of Hedorah. There's a species of undiscovered spider there that then feeds off him, and it then evolves. And over a period of time, you have two alphas on this island. One will be the returning Godzilla, and the other will be Kumonga. And it's the battle for the island between the two. So that, for me, is different because we've already seen what Godzilla can do in a major city via -1. We don't know where we'll lead in the second one, but if we did the third one, I think they should keep it remote and keep it separate on an island and make it more like a jungle adventure movie.
Yeah. So in the long run, what do you think the legacy of Kumonga will be? Even if they don't do another film with Kumonga, what do you think the legacy will be eventually?
I think when it comes to Kumonga, I think his legacy's already been made in terms of he was the first major foe to Minya. and he was terrifying, and he proved he could wrestle with Godzilla. So I think that's his legacy. I think, like with a lot of these Seiya characters, they might not, have the fan base the way like a Mecha Godzilla or a King Ghidorah have, but they will always be remembered for being somebody that went toe to toe with Godzilla. Like, I still hear a lot of people wanting Titanosaurus to return. I've heard people, they want the Gargantuas to return. They want, even want Gorosaurus to return. So I think
Gamera.
And we're still on Gamera in fighting Godzilla, which could potentially happen closer than you think. The fact that Toho slightly dropped the ball there, because, as you know, you and I play the mobile game Godzilla Battle Lines. Gamera has actually featured there. Not only has he been featured from Gamera Rebirth, he's also been featured in his Showa era form with Gaios. So the fact that you never thought in a million years you got Gamera in a Godzilla mobile game. Who's to say, few years, say, give it another 4 or 5 years, he may make an appearance in a movie with Godzilla. And who's to say the threat isn't Kumonga?
Yeah.
So that's what I think. I think Kumonga's legacy is already made. I think it was made back when he made his appearance as the first major threat to Minya, and he stood toe to toe with Godzilla. And he's always a kaiju that I think who may not be in the mind of fan, but he's always still rememberable.
Yeah. So for your channel, what do you got coming up? Anything coming up for you?
Let's think. I've got 2 trailer reactions coming hopefully later today. Outside of those, it's just whatever I've got remaining, which I think we've got Coming Peace coming on the Retro Classic movie show. I think we're doing that soon, and then it's whatever I've got planned in the new year, which is, I know that way on the 31st of January, we'll be doing the next Kaiju Classic review, which is the Giant Behemoth, which is the audience's choice. And then also on the 17th of January, we'll be doing the Into the Darkness, the Grudge franchise review.
Yep, I'm really looking forward to all that. So for myself, obviously tomorrow I am going to be doing a Ghouls of Midnight with Mr. Tony the Dead later in the evening for Free Jack, which is his choice this week. Then Thursday I will be getting together with Anthony Jordan from Movies and Gaming as we do a Kaiju spotlight on King Ghidorah. Then Friday, you and I will be hitting up Cinematic Synergy to do Split Second, starring the late Rutger Hauer. And then later in the evening, I believe I will be joining Sci-Fi Century. I don't know if you're going to be there or not, but we're doing a review of Astro Monster. And then the following week...
You did ask, but I'm not available.
Yeah, see. Then the following week on the 26th, I will be doing another action film Autopsy with Rick Myers. And then, of course, the 27th, you and I will hook up for a retro show to do I Come in Peace. Yeah. And then later in the evening, Neko and I will be doing the best of rock and metal music of 2024. And finally, on the 28th, which will end the December, basically doing another Kaiju Spotlight with Mr. Connor to do Megalon Spotlight. So that's what I've got closing out the month. I do have my top 10 movies, but I'm going to wait till after I see Nosferatu because I'm 100% sure it's going to be in my top 10. It may be number 1 because right now I'm pretty solid on my number 1, but if Nosferatu is actually as good as everyone says it is, it could overtake everything.
I think it's going to be my number 1 as well, I'll be honest. There is a couple, I think, on mine where I'm going to have to do mine sometime in the middle of January because, unfortunately, because the UK are dicks, we are not getting Nosferatu on Christmas Day, which I could have went to see a few days after. We're actually getting it on New Year's Day. So I might actually visit.
It's still 2024, but then you get to review it to 2025.
So I'm off New Year's Day and the day after New Year's Day. So it might actually be something I go to visit the day after New Year's. So who knows? I'll let you. My review will be up there as soon as I see it.
Yeah, he'll probably review it from his car. He's like, I just got out of the theater. It's so good. Well, thank you, sir, for joining me. It's been a blast. A lot of great ideas. I'm glad to bounce around this topic with you. And again, I'm doing this because I wanted to kind of shed some spotlight on some of the kaiju that don't get talked about as much. I mean, even down the road, maybe we start touching on some of the MonsterVerse kaiju if we get more information on them or whatever. But for now, we're just kind of sticking with some of the Toho stuff. But thank you much. And please go out, like and subscribe to the Entertainment Headquarters. Great channel, great content, and a great collaborator and friend. And for the rest of you, hit the like and subscribe button if you enjoy the content. If you have any questions or comments about this episode, just hit us in the comments there. We will both answer them to your leisure. Until then, though, enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you next time on the Middletown Radio Podcast.